Hey everybody, welcome back I suppose to Dead Cells. I made a video on this in 2017 when it had just come out in early access, and I wanted to look at it again because of how much has changed. When I started playing Dead Cells, I first saw it at a convention, the PC Gamer Weekender, in that same year, 2017 I think, and I went back about 7 times to play it again over the course of the weekend. I immediately was charmed by the visuals, which are the sort of richly coloured pixel art that was becoming popular at the time, I think, or maybe a little earlier. And it's incredibly fluid movement. Dead Cells has always, since it was ever seen by the public, has always felt fantastic to move around in. The dodge roll is really nice, the movement in general is very crisp. There's lots of affordances for jumping onto ledges or climbing up around edges if you've not quite got enough height and that sort of thing. And you have access to a ground slam, which is like my favourite thing in games, right from the off. So there's no point that you don't have to unlock the ground slam. There's no, there's not really a cooldown on it. You can just do it. That has always enamored it to me, and still does. But my favourite thing about it now is actually how willing the developers are to reinvent the core mechanics in the name of balancing it, essentially. We are now on, this is on the 1.9 patch on the beta branch, I think. And 1.0 was the early access release, I believe. So we're now 9 major versions into the game, and each one represents a strong overhaul of the mechanics of progression or combat or the balance of the game. There's a lot of stuff that changes between each one. The broad, I'll start playing in a minute, but the broad structure of Dead Cells, for those unfamiliar, is it's a roguelite. That is, each run is a single encapsulated thing. When you die, you go all the way back to the start. And finishing the game, air quotes, will in theory take an hour or so if you don't die, but will in practice take a lot longer because the game is hard. However, as you run, you unlock upgrades which make your you increase your moveset, increase your power level over the course of multiple runs, and allow you to make progress even when you don't get all the way through, alongside the natural progress that is learning to get better at the game. Not that has worked that well on me. I have 172 hours in this game and I still suck. The gameplay-wise, it's a side-scrolling combat platformer, heavily influenced by, what else, Dark Souls, among other things. And it's got a kind of Metroidvania structure where some of the things you can unlock are these, what the game calls runes, which allow you to access new areas or new routes through the game. You don't always play the same levels each time, you have some choices, and those choices expand as you unlock runes and get further into the game. You can visit alternate, what the game calls biomes levels, basically, which have different enemy sets and different amounts of rewards and that sort of thing. And even different bosses. There's multiple different bosses that you don't have to fight in order to beat the game. So you have those options depending on your build. The game has quite a large set of weapons. The overall loadout structure is that you have 2 weapons, although they've just added 2-handed weapons, which take up both slots, and 2 what's called skills, which can be anything from grenades to turrets to traps to healing spells to all sorts of stuff. They're quite, there's a teleport spell or a thing that pushes people back, and it's quite varied, and there's a lot of different weapons. Broadly, these skills fit into 3 colours or categories. I don't know what they're actually called. Skills, I suppose, called Strength, Brutality, and Tactics. And each one, not Strength, Survival, Brutality, and Tactics. Each one is basically a statistic that you level up by picking up scrolls, and each item does more damage based on how much of one of these skills, or sometimes 2 of them, you have. So you're always focusing your run around one stat and trying to max out that stat. You get more HP for levels in any of them, but it diminishes as you get more. So normally you end up with like 15 or 20 or 25 scrolls in the stat of your choice, or more on higher difficulties. Or and then like maybe 5 or 6 in each of the others by the end of the run, just to pad out your health. And one of the things they did in this update actually was make that smoother. So they think among the things they've rebalanced in this update, they've completely redone the gold economy. Previously, it was quite difficult to buy weapons during a run from shops. They were very expensive. And this meant that you would typically start with a weapon, especially as you also have to pay to upgrade them. You would start with one weapon and you would probably use that for the entire run. And part of their original design intent was that you could actually mix and match quite easily. So this new version of Dead Cells makes the gold scaling way less aggressive. Like previously, things were cheap early on, but got incredibly, like prohibitively expensive later. And now things are cheap throughout. And so you can swap weapons like 5 or 6 times during a run, which is really nice because you can tailor your loadout to what's in front of you. You know, which levels you know are upcoming. And especially boss fights. Like, doing a boss fight with the wrong weapon is a huge issue. There is an insect on my screen. And, you know, the bosses tend to be, in a lot of games, sort of singular, where they have specific strengths and weaknesses that are very difficult to overcome compared to the normal levels. So I'm just going to turn the volume down slightly. My cursor down. There we go. Yeah, so now you can sort of tailor your build a little bit over the course of the game to what's coming up next. The game has 5 difficulty levels called boss cells. I've unlocked 2. As you can see, they change the amount of healing you get over the course of the run, the strength of the enemies, and they allow you to access higher level upgrades. I've been playing on 1 boss cell, even though I've got 2 unlocked, just to kind of basically grind more upgrades and get better at the game without challenging myself too much. So let's stick with that. Over here you can see this display of all the weapons and items I've unlocked, of which, like, I've unlocked tons and there are tons more to go. There's some stuff up here where you can see your run progression. None of that was in the base release. There's alter costumes down the bottom. Another thing they added. Other things they've changed recently is they've added this. Oop, I just picked up whatever that was. Moonstone Amulet. So I've got a tactics bonus. So yeah, now you get a free amulet on higher difficulties, which is like one of the equipment slots you can pick up. And this gives me more jumps. That's pretty sweet. You can see that it has this... Can I select it? No. You can see that it has this a little icon on it with a purple lightning bolt. That's a tactics scroll. And now you can see in the bottom left, my tactics value is 2, so that'll make tactics weapons stronger. It used to be that you get a random starting weapon. You get a random melee weapon, a random ranged weapon, and a random shield. Now you get this, or you can unlock this, which is basically entire loadouts, and you get to pick one of them. This starts you off with much more diverse and strong equipment really early on, because you would occasionally, like, it was a bit of a scramble to get all your slots filled, and until this patch, items and weapons gave you more scrolls, so it was really important to have those extra stats, and if you weren't 4-slotted by the time you made it to the 2nd level, you were hugely behind, just, you know, if the level randomly didn't have stuff in it. So this fixes that problem. And again, this is like a massive change to the feel of the early part of the run, especially on higher difficulties where, like, or if you're new to the game, where this first level is a real challenge. You know, when you're learning a new boss cell or just introduced to the game, like, you know, it bites back pretty hard. The one downside of this is that if you don't know what any of the items are, you can't really make good guesses about what they do. But you can see they have coloured auras that are green, purple, or red, or sometimes both, that match which scrolls they are. So let me just take a quick look. I'm incentivized to go tactics because of my amulet. Ooh, there's a pyrotechnics. on the right over there. That's a good weapon. This one is mostly survival stuff. That's the green. That's bad. This one's pretty good. The axes at the bottom are very powerful. It's like a melee ranged hybrid weapon. And there's an ice grenade, which is a really strong weapon as well. Weapon with strong skill. Or I can do this, which is pyrotechnics, which like throws fireballs, and the one at the top is a phaser that lets you teleport behind people, but those are quite bad together, so I'm going to go for this one. So now that I've opened the canister, I can see what they all do. Do I want a second weapon or a shield? I normally take a shield, especially as I don't really need a ranged weapon and shrapnel axes, because they're already a ranged weapon. Just grab this. What does tonic do these days? Grants you 50% of missing health as bonus health. And protects you from damage. It's like a healing item. So none of this was in the game the last time I made a video. Right, they've like completely overhauled weapon scaling in this patch as well. So I mentioned that weapons used to give scrolls, and now they don't. They just have stats. So they've rescaled all of the damage and HP values of the enemies across every difficulty to account for the fact that you're no longer obliged to pursue weapons with scrolls and try and make sure that all your weapons line up exactly right, which is great because most shields are survival. If you're playing a non-survival build, your shield will provide the wrong scrolls, but if you're playing survival, you basically get 2 more scrolls essentially on your shield for free, and each scroll gives you 15% more damage, and that stacks multiplicatively, so that's actually a huge amount of extra damage, making survival builds way stronger. You know, if you wanted to use a shield, which generally is a good idea. Shields and Dead Cells, you can use them to block and parry, but you can also use them to, while you have a shield, every time you take damage, you become invincible for a brief period of time. And that's incredibly useful against certain enemies. Like, there's an enemy that spins into you and hits you repeatedly, and shields make them way less threatening, even if you don't actually block them. So we're now in the first level, which is called the Prisoner's Quarters. It's the same level every time. As you can see, there's this sort of platforming style movement. There's like a secret shop area down there. We've got branching, so you can explore the level a bit more. This is a teleporter, so you can backtrack quite easily within the level. Got some enemies to beat up. Pick that up. There's these little health items that you can... Oh, items hidden in the ground that you can pick up. When you parry a grenade in this game, it reflects it back at the enemy. That wasn't in the first release. Got these new enemy types, the little rats. They added those recently. Hello. These invisible knife throwers weren't in the first release either. This is reasonably threatening. Another thing they've changed is the between level rewards. So there used to be these things called timed doors, where if you beat a level fast enough, you get a bonus. And that was a problem because you're incentivized to explore the levels because they have items in. But the timed doors essentially gave you similar rewards to that if you were good enough to go for them. So for good players, there was absolutely no incentive to explore. For people like me who like exploring and aren't very good, the timed doors were just a thing I wasn't allowed to have. Do I want this? How does it compare to the normal one? Nah. Oh, I missed my parry. The parry windows in this game are a bit odd. You kind of have to block preemptively compared to what you'd expect. Again, 172 hours. I'm still not really used to the parry timing. They did add the ability to just hold shields up. Ooh, he says not doing that. Which does make them a lot better. Like, you can prevent yourself from taking... They block like 75% of damage, I think it is. So you still take some damage, but not much. And that requires like way less, that doesn't require timing. Another thing they changed recently is these used to be categories in the shop that you could choose between. So it would be like melee, ranged, can't even remember what the third weapon category was. Now you choose a scroll, which is much better, because in practice, like off-color weapons are useless. Now I always get an option to choose between tactics items. That is quite a lot better than my current one. What's this? Sadist's Stiletto. That really requires synergy to be good. There is a mutation, which is a thing you can get between levels that also wasn't in the first release, that makes your attacks deal bleeding damage, which makes this very good. So we could scoop this up, take open wounds, and get the bonus crit damage all the time. But this is not that much less damage, and it's a really good weapon. Don't want that. Actually, we kind of do. Oh, I can't afford it. Hello. I was talking about timed doors. So, more recently, not in the latest update, but in the update before, I feel, they added another door that you can unlock by killing a certain amount of enemies without taking damage. That amount is quite high. In the first level, it's 30, and thereafter it's 60. So I might not get it this time around. Depends on how many enemies are left in the level. It is a slightly feel-bad mechanic in that, like, I have a couple of times gotten hit after 59 enemy kills. And that kind of obviates your run. Like, there isn't a thing where you can have, like, kill a certain percent of the enemies in the level without getting hit. So, like, you can take a hit at the start or at the end of a level, but if you take a hit in the middle, it's gonna remove that reward from you. So it's not a perfect system, but it does mean that there's something that I can go for that also is, like, good practice. You know, not getting hit makes you take less damage, makes you better at the game. That also... That's the wrong one. That also rewards you for exploring, because if you don't run into 60 enemies because you're just blasting through the level. There we go, we got it. Ooh, that's neat. So enemies drop items nowadays. That is not actually that much damage, considering it's legendary. That's kind of bad. The quick bow is quite good, but it takes a little while. Basically, it's you hold down the fire button and it shoots rapidly. And then once you've shot 2 or more arrows into a target, it starts dealing much more damage to them. But the fact that it takes a little while to wind up makes it a bit weaker. This game still very heavily incentivizes bursting enemies down, which I think is a thing they haven't really solved yet. And the addition of the rewards for not getting hit ever kind of exacerbate that. So I would say that's a criticism still. Like, if that reward didn't exist... the survival skill tree includes, like, weapons that don't get interrupted when you're hit, and all sorts of, like, sort of slow, tanky builds where... Ooh, that's a lot of DPS. That's a lot of DPS. That's basically the same with slightly more damage reduction. The one we have returns our arrows. I could pick this to replace the tonic. It's sort of more on theme. Punishment is also a really, really good shield. It deals damage in an AoE around it when you block. And the AoE damage on shields goes through walls. So you can hit enemies that are, like, above you, which is really nice. The spike shield just hits enemies that you block. But this one deals more damage and in a big AoE. But I think this is pretty good, because we can take the... Oh, it's more backstab damage too. So we can take the mutation that deals... bleeding hits. There's also another mutation that gives you, like, cooldown reduction on your skills when you deal critical hits, which makes weapons like this, where you can crit really easily, amazing. So we'll take this, recycle that. Because recycling was another thing they added post, I think since the last time I did this. This is the collector, for those unaware. The collector is where you spend your cells, which are the upgrade currency in the game. So cells are lost when you die, but the upgrades you purchase with them persist between runs. So at this point I've got quite a lot of stuff to unlock potentially. I know the boomerang is bad. I unlocked it on a previous save, which I then like lost to a Steam Cloud mess up, I think. Boy's Axe, I've never tried that. War Javelin. I did try this on an alpha branch once and it was terrible, but I think they buffed it. Let's just like nearly finish unlocking this. This is pretty cool. It's one of the two-handed weapons, but it's two different two-handed weapons and you alternate between them to get massive damage. Ooh, I can upgrade this. That seems good, actually. So this is the... You can upgrade the weapons. This used to be a very useful screen because... So there's different... There's two different levels of weapon. There's... I think it's just called level, which is the number. So the Roman numeral, the 4 here. This is a 1. This is a 1. And the level increases as you go along. The quality, which is either neutral, plus, or S, or legendary, which are like special ones that we saw earlier, like the quick bow. Those ones are independent of when you are in your run, and you upgrade those. There's like a chance of dropping higher quality weapons, which you upgrade as one of like the late game cell sinks, called the Legendary Forge, which you can find after bosses, that increases your chance of dropping higher quality weapons. And for a while there was a system where you could pay what was a fairly substantial amount of gold to upgrade your weapon to the next quality, but you can only do it once. Now, I think in the most recent, in the previous major update, they added the ability to do it more than once. So you could, which is great, because you were no longer like basically restricted to fight only the higher quality weapons you could find. Because over the course of the run, if you can't upgrade it past ++, you're losing out, because when weapon scrolls were a thing, the quality of the item correlated to how many scrolls it had. So the higher qualities were way important. Now, you can upgrade them as much as you want, and it's cheaper. But you can't upgrade the level. So the level gets better as you go along, but the quality doesn't. So you're incentivized to like, I'm going to upgrade this now because it costs hardly anything to do so. And then later on, I'm going to find like a level 8 or level 9 weapon and just throw this one away. So you can build your own power spikes over the course of the run, and it's so much more fun when the game plays this way. The only downside to this weapon is I'm going to kind of commit to it by picking one of my mutations. But that's part of the incentive of upgrading it. I might just upgrade it again, actually. That is so much damage. Critical hits, 20% more damage, shoots an arrow upward. That's really strong. Screw it. Launches a grenade, bite a scroll from the dead, 75% damage on rooted target. Okay, so those are bad mutations. Not mutations. Affixes, whatever they're called. But the actual DPS on this thing is absurd. So we're going to have some fun. And here you can get your mutations, which are abilities that you can have 3 of them. You can pay to reset them. But this gets more expensive after you do it for the first time. So you generally only do it for the final boss. Mutations are, I would say, another weak spot in the game. In that the mutations, most of them are really bad against bosses. There are lots of them that are like, every time you kill an enemy, do X. Which doesn't work if there's only one enemy in the level. A lot of the bosses don't spawn any additional minions or anything, so these mutations just don't work against them. And there are some situational ones, which are mostly the colourless ones. Again, a lot of these don't really work against bosses, but probably more of them do. So the mutations scale with the stat you have in that colour. So I normally want to take tactics mutations here. But some of these are for melee attacks, and some of them are for ranged attacks, which is like more of a division. There's like 2 tactics builds, basically. There's the keep away build, where you build turrets. And there's the sort of sneaky melee build, where you can like turn invisible and reduce your cooldowns and stuff. But we're actually going to take a brutality mutation. I want this open wounds, which is going to make my melee attacks deal bleeding, which will then cause my status stiletto to crit for ridiculous amounts of damage. Here there's like this healing station where you can restore your HP between levels. The amount of health you get depends on what difficulty you're playing on. On 0 BC, you get a full restore of your health and all flask charges, which are like, if you play Dark Souls, like Estus flasks, it's basically a thing you can use, in this case, 4 times in a run once you've got it fully upgraded, and it restores, it's about 60 or 70% HP. On higher difficulties, you might get just 1 charge for the flask, or nothing. On one boss cell, which I'm playing now, you get like, you alternate between getting just 1 charge for the flask and then a full reload. So it's relatively generous for the sort of for my comfort level with the game. On 2 boss cells, which I've played a bit, it's just a flask charge, and then I think you get a full recharge after bosses, which is not the worst, but it really makes the attrition add up. Oh, hello. I got hit there, but like this early into the level, it doesn't matter. Like that's not really going to affect my ability to get the 0 damage bonus. And as you can see, I'm now... Ooh, hello. I'm getting like the crits, which have the extra effect, like the sort of ringing sound and a bonus burst of damage on every subsequent hit on enemies. So I'm really stacking up the damage. Whoop. I'm also spawning these little friends every time I kill something, and they add up fast too. They're surprisingly effective. Oh my god. There we go. Whoop. Be gone, fiend. I gotta admit, the addition of these rats to the game makes it a lot easier to get the number of kills bonus, because there's just way more in individual enemies. So one thing I'm really looking for right now is a second skill, because the tonic that I have, which is the sort of syringe-looking thing on map to LT, is not actually very effective for me. My plan is to not get hit, and just burst enemies as soon as they show up. In boss fights, that's less practical, but especially during the levels, it's not actually that helpful for me. So I want something that will give me more DPS or more utility than a healing item that I intend to not have to use. I'm not at the point in the run yet where enemies do like a ton of damage. So although my HP is quite low because tactics builds have the least HP. Ooh, hello. I need to not stand in the poison. They added like a sort of forgiveness to it where you can stand briefly in poison, and if you immediately hop out, it won't actually deal damage to you, which was much needed. Like this level used to be an absolute nightmare because the poison in the first early access launch, the poison hit quite hard. Like it dealt a lot of damage. There we go, we got the 60 kills. Now I can take hits and it doesn't matter. The poison dealt quite a lot of damage and triggered if you just briefly brushed it. Right, let's hope for a skill here. Ooh, Wave of Denial. Wave of Denial is so good. I need to farm money and come back here. Wave of Denial pushes enemies away from you, and if they hit walls, they take damage. It interrupts attacks. It's really good because it's kind of like an aggressive defensive item. More scrolls. Just parry that. Thank you very much. I'm trying to think what else they've changed in this big update. I'm sure they've changed more stuff. So that floor that I just slammed through, that's one of the runes that you can pick up. Like, you always have a ground slam, which is just this move. But there's an upgrade that allows you to ground slam through, like, breakable floors. So now that I've reached the end of this kind of branch of the level, I'm going to use the teleporter to backtrack and find more stuff. So you can kind of, as you can see here, this I had to slam through the floor to get to this exit, the ancient sewers. So it's not actually available immediately. And normally, where does this level go otherwise? They keep changing it. Frontline Shield. Melee attacks deal more damage after a successful parry. And it deals a little bit of damage back. Oh, and it poisons enemies. That's pretty good, actually. Because that gives us that triggers the status stiletto as well, so our first hit will deal more damage. So I think we can go for that. Where else are we going? Down here. Ice shards are fine. Toxic cloud is pretty good. Bleeding causes poisoning. That's exciting. That's pretty good, actually. I'm going to go back and get Wave of Denial, but this is a good substitute. Oops. Ooh, there's a barnacle up there, actually. Barnacle's cool. It's like a floating or ceiling turret. Drops a grenade when destroyed. Barnacle is quite good against bosses, so I could actually hold on to this instead of Wave of Denial. No, Wave of Denial is so good. Let's recycle this. And I think Wave of Denial was like $26.50 in the shop. Oh, I missed a branch. I haven't found like the normal exit yet, so there must be more stuff in this level. Ooh, hello. Get back here, you. Oh, hello. I got hit there, but it's not a big deal because I already have the bonus. Well, that's not how to throw an ice grenade. This sort of purple coffin thing. Oh, here we go. So this is a scroll with only two choices. So I can, as you can see, they aren't going to increase my damage, but they will. The brutality one would level up my bleeding skill, which is not a huge deal. It's like a small amount of extra DPS. We're not really using it to deal damage. The green one just gives us more health, which I think we want. We want to. So survival gives the most HP. This purple coffin is another thing that you unlock with runes. Blood shield, yes please. This is really good actually. So again, this is nice with the stiletto, but it's better than the frontline shield because it has an AoE when you parry. So it doesn't deal that much damage by itself, but the bleeding AoE is really, really nice. So we've now got enough to afford that Wave of Denial. So I'm going to just poke around until I find a teleporter. And then head back. Oop. Sell me your wares. Hell yeah. I had to nerf Wave of Denial and it's still one of the better items in the game. So the door I just went through, that's the wrong colour. The door I just went through is like a boss cell door. They unlock when you're playing on the requisite difficulty, so you just get like slightly more items and options. We got here. Corrupted Prison. I think that's one of the... Corrupted Prison is new. I think it's one of the shorter levels that you can sort of do interstitially between others. I'm probably going to do it because having extra levels in your run means you get more chances to get scrolls. So now you can see the HP scaling on scrolls here. So the first survival gave me 70% HP. This one gives me 41. So it's like diminishing returns. So now I'm incentivized to pick this one. Which also gives me 3 extra DPS on my bleeding. which is not useful, but is nice. Ooh, hello. These vines are another rune. This is interesting. If I remember correctly, my status stiletto deals more damage to rooted targets. And this has a big AoE that roots people. And it deals more DPS. Victims freeze when they die. So rooting is not as good as freezing, obviously. Well, obviously. So rooting means they can't move, but they can still attack. So it's certainly less good against bosses. However, given that it gives me a bunch more DPS, I'm going to pick it, I think. I might regret this decision. We'll see. So that was Wave of Denial in action. It insta-kills the small enemies and shoves bigger ones against walls for damage. And it has a 5-second cooldown. Hello. If given the opportunity, use this item. I've genuinely used Wave of Denial on non-tactics builds before, it's so good. Oh. Wasn't quite quick enough on the turnaround parry there. Another thing you might notice about my health bar when I take damage is the health. Sorry, the damage I take is shown as like yellow. This wall running is another rune. Oh, the damage that I take is shown as yellow, and the yellow damage then kind of degrades over time until you've taken the full amount of damage. But hitting things while you have yellow damage recuperates a part of it, so you can mitigate how much you just got hit for by hitting back. It's called the rally mechanic. There's actually a mutation that makes it better, and a couple of items that in this patch give you yellow health so that you can then deal damage and heal overall. So I think I'm going to go to the Corrupted Prison, because I think it's one of the small interstitial extra levels. I'm a little bit low on HP, but I'll just use a flask to get it back. I want to check what the how much health recovery there is. We got the good door, so I get a little bit of money, some extra cells for upgrading, and then a choice of items. Ooh, upgrade to our amulet. Damage from projectiles reduced by 75%. This might be good, because I think I'm going to end up fighting a boss that has like a bullet hell attack. It also has damage reduction overall. Wings of the Crow is pretty good. It's like an item that makes you float around and deal lightning damage below you. And there's a shovel that we can't use. I think I'm just going to go for this. I like that they added the little teleporters to those rooms. Right, I'm actually not going to unlock this, because when you unlock a weapon, you get it. So it's quite useful to like leave things on one cell to unlock, and then when you're in a run and you have a bad weapon, or you want an upgrade, you can just unlock something on the cheap. Here, this is a survival item, which I don't want. And I'm really well loaded out right now, so I don't need it. I think I'm going to save my cells for the forge, the legendary forge after the boss. So we can't unlock this further. Upgrading this might be good. I don't have that much money. I'm going to upgrade this, actually. Poisons the enemy, yes. Bonus damage to bleeding targets, yes. We should probably unlock some tactics mutations. This one is very good. It makes you leave these little caltrops behind that damage and slow enemies. The slow is really good because it also slows their attacks. So it makes it much harder for them to pursue you, and you can just nip in and kill them. First melee strike against an enemy inflicts bonus damage. This is really nice for bursting people, especially as our first attack is weaker. But we don't really need it, and it doesn't do anything against bosses. Oh wait, it does 201 damage to a boss, and then he's useless. Non-melee attacks. Killing enemies makes me invisible. This one's super fun, I think, but again, not useful against bosses, so I'm probably not going to take it. I'm going to take this one first, because this one is great. and then we'll see how the build is stacked up. So here there's another flask, so I'm just going to drink a flask charge, which I think should, yeah, restores me to full HP. Pick up the extra charge, and let's go. So a recent change they made to some of the smaller levels is they added a cursed chest at the start. So cursed chests are a thing that are in the run in general. But the way it works is they have a bunch of rewards in, but then you're cursed, and if you take damage while cursed, you die instantly. So they're very risk versus reward. They are worth picking up because if you survive, they contain scrolls, so you're permanently stronger for the entire run. So we don't need. Ooh, maybe we did need that. No, we don't need that. I disassembled that weapon without thinking, but actually that was super strong. So we're now cursed. So if I get hit here, I'm dead. So I'm just going to play really conservatively. I have to kill 10 enemies to lift the curse. Fortunately, that's what Wave of Denial is for. Look at all these rats. And curse lifted. Problem solved. Wave of Denial, OP. Like, unironically OP. Oh, hello. One thing that is not obvious until you kind of see it in action is that the stats of a weapon are important, but what's just as important, if not more, is its attack animation. Weapons with bad attack animations, that is a real cost, even if they have great stats, which is something they play with quite deliberately in the survival class builds. So survival is all about, you have more HP, there are mutations that can heal you so you can take damage. As I mentioned, there's some conflict between that and the fact that you're incentivized to not get hit at all. Which also makes the survival weapons kind of worse. Like, the incentives aren't that strong, so it's not a big deal. Like, you lose out on some cells and money. And slightly improved items, but it used to be a lot worse before you always started the run with an amulet, because amulets, which is this thing in the top right, are much harder to come by. You get them off elite enemies, which are rarer than they used to be, I think. What have we got here? Wolf Trap, Magnetic Grenade, Flamethrower. These are all fine, but not as good as my Root Grenade that gives me more damage, and Wave of Denial, which does that. I'm just going to wait for it to come off cooldown and kill all these rats with it again. See ya. Kill those with the Root Grenade. Wave of Denial. These big enemies are actually quite threatening, but we're dealing so much damage with the stiletto that it's irrelevant. Hello. Oh yeah, that's the other thing about Wave of Denial. It reflects projectiles. Which is hella cool. Now go away, mate. I was really excited about this fancy shield I've got, and I haven't used it yet. Oh, knocking enemies off things deals damage when they hit the floor. And if they land on an enemy, it deals more damage, which is a really fun mechanic. There's a couple of items that take advantage of this really well. One of them is a shield, which is really cool. It's called the Assault Shield. Oh, hello. I almost got hit there by slamming onto that grenade. The Assault Shield dashes you forward, and it also knocks back enemies. Oh, God. These totems, or whatever they're called, that provide... Hey, you got the 60. That provide shields to enemies are a huge pain. Especially, like, my playstyle and tactics in general in this game rely heavily on bursting enemies. And when they're invincible, you can't do that. What have we got? Quite near the end already. Okay, so there's... on boss cell 1, you can take a different route through the level. I think I'm going to do Ancient Sewers. It's a more challenging level, but probably worth it. I don't want any of these items. I'll just grab one and sell it. Maybe this repair will be really good. Nah. The repair is a really cool weapon. It deals bonus damage after you roll. Oh, sorry, correction. It deals critical hits after you roll, which is effectively the same thing. It used to be really, really good, like in super early on in development, but at some point it got nerfed and it's never really been the same again. I'm gonna keep my cells for the legendary forge. Let's see. Upgrading this doesn't do that much. Like, the damage it deals isn't majorly significant. We just want the bleeding for the crits on this, really. And for cleaning out small enemies that have really low HP. This could be good to upgrade. Like, the DPS on the root grenade is actually quite significant. You know, this is 38 DPS. So if we upgrade it, it'll be like 50 or something. This is 127, so it's quite a lot. This is already on full upgrade. Yeah, we'll upgrade this. Shoots a volley of arrows, that's nice. Yeah, now it's on 172 DPS, which is quite a lot. Right, third mutation. What do we get? We don't want this. We don't want this. We don't want this. Because that's arrows. Non-melee attack, we don't want that. Killing an enemy makes you invisible. That's super fun. It's very tempting. By the end of the game, the invisibility is quite long. So it's a really good way of, like, you know, you kill an enemy and then the others won't attack you. Deployed skills we don't have. Dodging an attack at the last moment gives us slow. That's not bad. Our dodges give us slow anyway, so I don't know if that's really helpful. No enemies near me, that's bad. So the only one we can really pick is Predator of this class. Or we can just take, like, Dead Inside or something and get more HP. Or this. So this reduces the cooldown on my skills with each critical hit. And we are farming crits. So that means we get a lot of root grenades. So that's very tempting. The downside is that with Open Wounds and Instinct of the Master of Arms, I am hard committed to this Sadist Stiletto. And at some point I'm going to want to switch it off. You know, like, we found a legendary weapon that deals about as much damage as it. At some point we'll start finding normal weapons that deal about that much damage. So it might be that we need to switch this off. That said, I could just go all in on it. And, like, it's a really, you know, it's a good weapon. I'm dealing a lot of damage. This is quite fun. Yeah, let's give it a try. I hardly ever get to use this particular mutation, so let's see how it works out. So this is the Ancient Sewers, which is like a really finicky level. Hello. Get in the sea. Oh, got hit. Those mushrooms are real hard to deal with. Barnacle. No, I'm fine. My build's pretty good. So this level is like this claustrophobic warren. Go away. I like how the first one died to the Wave of Denial, and then the second one died to, like, the fire that the Wave of Denial put on the ground. The other nice thing about Wave of Denial is it's got an instant cast time, or close to instant. It's like a few frames, maybe. Let's get our damage bonus going. So it often kills people faster than your normal attacks would. Hello. The other cool thing about the ground slamming through the destructible floors is when the floors break, they can fall on enemies and deal major amounts of damage. Whoa, that was... Ooh, hello. That was scary. It's platforming sections. Another challenge. Ah! Damn it. So, what happened there was, I jumped to the wall and the game was like, hey, you want to run up this wall? Which is an upgrade I have. I didn't intend to do that. So this is actually this is mostly a huge strength of the game, and occasionally a downside. That deals more damage than our upgraded one. And it has better... No, it has worse upgrades. So ours deals 60% bonus damage to a bleeding target, so actually this is better. I'll save my money. I should probably neck a health potion at this point. Let's do that. The downside of tactics is you have really low HP. Yeah, so the challenge with the platforming sections in this is like, there's the attrition of getting hit, but it also resets the counter of killing enemies. Like, any damage counts, not just damage dealt to enemies. Ooh, that's one of my favourite skills, but I can't use it because it's the wrong colour. It's really cool. It makes you jump up and do like a bigger ground slam that spreads a big AoE of spikes. And I like it for two reasons. One of which is that I love ground slams, and the other of which is that the damage it deals is absolutely absurd. These egg throwers are super annoying. Fortunately, the little creeps they spawn die to the spikes from my mutation, which is quite nice. Ooh, there's a vine there. I should check out what's on top of it. Frontline Shield. Probably not. Oh, Cudgel even. They keep renaming all the shields. So it's kind of cool because it's basically the same game, right? But they've changed so much, like about the flow of it, about the economy of it, about the balance. God, that's a lot of crit damage. This one is very hard to use though. Basically, it's a whip, and if you hit them with the exact tip of the attack, you get the bonus. So as you can see, I'm starting to pick up, to see weapons just lying around that deal, you know, close to as much damage as my fully upgraded Sadist Stiletto, because the level is quite significant now. Nothing that actually approaches it, but you know, the crit damage is looking pretty similar. Be gone. You can block those bombs that spawn from the big slug things, which then like allows you to kind of reflect them around. This is really good with I mentioned the assault shield earlier, the one that dashes you forward and like knocks enemies around. Because you can kind of scoop your way through all the bombs and punt them around, keeping yourself safe. One cool thing they did relatively recently is they added enemies to levels that precede a boss that reflect some attribute of that boss that's normally quite difficult to deal with. So these tentacles, the boss we're about to fight, spawns, like, once in a while it sort of retreats and then spawns tentacles. Hello. Go away. You can actually block those thrown eggs and you like gain control of them. Oh no! That's so sad. I tried to parry it, but I mistimed it. Yeah, so those tentacles are spawned by the boss we're about to fight. And they're very difficult to deal with. It spawns like 5 of them. Just done the wall of denial there. It spawns like 5 of them, and each time you kill one, the others all get faster. So it's real difficult to deal with. This room is an elite room, so if I enter here, it will spawn a tough enemy that when it dies will drop an amulet or some other powerful upgrade. So we're just gonna... thought I was gonna get the kill there. That amulet would give us a lot of HP, but we don't want that, we want damage. Because of the diminishing returns on HP gained from scrolls, by the time we're at the end of the run, we'll have, like, we'll have sort of whatever bonuses are practical to pick up. And scrolls will start giving, like, you know, 10% HP or whatever. Just instant kill it with Wave of Denial. Lol. Don't want that. So it's it's beneficial to spam the scroll that is your primary stat as much as is humanly possible. We actually missed a section. I can't remember if there's a teleporter at the top here. This is a cool area that's unique to the end of this level, where enemies drop keys. Is there a teleporter? There is. Enemies drop keys throughout the level. There's like 3 or 4 keys you can pick up that allow you to choose from a bunch of items and money. Ooh, a legendary item. So these little plinths are quite cool. Basically, once you... They give extra health to enemies around them. But once you kill all the enemies, the plinth unlocks and you can pick up a legendary item. That is not useful. Legendaries are neat because they're colourless. And they get the damage bonus from whatever scroll you have the most of. This is all good. Oh. Which allows you to have weapons or skills from like a different skill tree that you wouldn't normally be able to use. So you can have some really fun builds with them. Wrong colour. Right, that's basically, I think that's everything. So let's just go shopping. What's going to be quicker? Probably dropping down the lift shaft. There's no fall damage in this game, but if you... Oh no! If you fall more than a certain distance, you get stunned when you land. That's happened there because I messed up. But you can ground slam to undo it. Like, you don't get stunned if you ground slam first. I don't think I want any of this stuff. So I'll just get the money and the cells. Oops. Even... So the ground slam actually has a maximum distance, but you can cancel out of it with a roll. I messed it up there, but you can ground slam, roll before the end of the slam, and then slam again. Which is a technique I saw used by speedrunners. Don't want to spend anything here, I just want to save for the forge. Right, let's sync some upgrades now. Give me that DPS. Sure, why not? 60 DPS. Poisons enemies blocked with a parry, that's pretty good actually. I might leave it at that. The bonus poison is probably more effective than the bonus damage on the bleed. Right, so we're about to fight Conjunctivius, who is a tentacle monster with a big eye. This boss used to be... Oh, one of the chains is glitched. This boss used to be truly horrendous to fight. Like, honestly, just horrific. It's not as bad nowadays, but she's still a pain in the ass. She has a trait that... excuse me. She has a trait that I find very irritating in boss fights in a lot of games. I should be rooting her, get the damage bonus. Where a lot of the time you can't practically attack her. Ooh, hello. So these are the tentacles I mentioned. These are a real problem because timing the blocks against them is a huge pain in the ass. I thought that one was going to come in faster, but I think it got slowed by the crow's feet. Let's root her, get in a massive amount of damage, and immediately force the second phase. We're actually crushing this fight through sheer DPS. Like, normally the tentacles are quite hard to get rid of, because they spend a lot of time below ground, but we deal so much damage that it is okay. And here, I think we're going to burst her down. Yeah, there we go. That was a really clean fight, actually. Normally it goes a lot worse than that. Oh, is that a beta Sadist Stiletto? No. It's actually a lower level. Ooh, sorry, just knocked my mic over. I hope that didn't cause too much noise. Right, so now I have the option of the Slumbering Sanctuary, which is kind of a cool level where there's like one set of enemies and then you wake the sanctuary up and then there's another different set of enemies. Or the Graveyard, which is a bit of a slog actually. How long do I want this video to be? Now is probably a good time to stop actually. We've been an hour. The runs can be kind of long in this game. Like, I spent a little bit of time talking at the start, I guess. The in-game timer is about 25 minutes, but that doesn't include like treasure rooms and the between-level collector sections and stuff. Like this bit. Oh, I'll just show you the Legendary Forge, actually, because I think this wasn't in the first release. So this is after boss fights. So there's, again, like a stronger risk versus reward where if you don't think you're going to make it to the boss, you're better off spending your cells at the collector. But if you reckon you can make it here, you can permanently improve your chance of finding higher quality items. And you're not allowed... So I'm not... The last one is S quality items. There's a certain limit to how much you can unlock depending on what boss cell level you're on. Like, I'm not sure we're even allowed to get S progress on boss cell 1. Every time you progress past one of these little bars, you get another 5% chance. I think we're going to make it this time. Yeah, so now I'm on... Oh, 65, even better. So each bar is, I guess, must be 150 cells. So this means that I don't need to upgrade my items as much, and they're better when I pick them up immediately. Quality is less significant now, thanks to the removal of weapon scrolls, or item scrolls, in this major patch. Which again, I just want to, like, it's difficult to say how much of a difference that's made. Like, being able to... I wasn't really showing it off here because we got, like, one busted weapon. And I'll probably be carrying that to quite close to the end of the run. But we still switched around, like, a reasonable amount before I found that stiletto and haven't been punished for it. And I've been able to freely swap out my skills. You know, I got that Wave of Denial when I saw it. I got the Root Grenade. And previously that would have been hugely punished because I'll have sunk money into upgrading these items so that I can get scrolls on them, which then... and that's a problem with dual scroll weapons as well, because they can have a mix of scrolls. You have to regenerate their affixes until you get the double scroll you want. So I would have sunk money into that, and then be picking up these weapons where, like, it's not really practical for me to further upgrade them, just because I'm not going to be able to afford it. I think I'm peaking slightly. Apologies if I've been peaking this entire time. Just turn the gain down on that. So the actual process of, like, establishing a build and then changing your mind when you find a cool new item or whatever in this version of the game is so much more fun and fluid than before. And, like, this game has been publicly available for 3 years, right? It's been in early access until last year? I forget exactly when. I should have looked this up before. Relatively recently it came out of early access. It might have been early this year. And that whole time they've been doing these big patches that, like, radically overhaul the structure of the game. Like, it's recognizably the same game. You know, the core idea is still there. These levels that you can go through in different order. The vines that add that kind of Metroidvania element that open up more routes. There's more vines. The runes. There's more runes than there used to be. Like, the Ground Slam wasn't in the game at launch. The one that breaks floors. The Wall Run one wasn't in the game at launch. I think there's another one. There's one that I don't have called Explorer's Instinct that when you've, like, seen most of a level, reveals the rest on the map. So you can make decisions about, like, okay, I need to go and check out this corner because there's a scroll there, but I can ignore this bit. Just saves you effort. Faffing about. I don't know how you unlock that. Maybe it's a blueprint. I haven't mentioned blueprints. Blueprints are dropped from enemies. Or occasionally picked up from, like, interacting with specific things. They're how you unlock weapons. you saw a bunch of items in the collector screen that I could put cells into to unlock. Those were put there by blueprints. These. So I've picked up, a blueprint for this, a blueprint for this, a blueprint for this. And then you unlock them by spending cells. Early on, there's like non-item upgrades that you get as well. Like you start out with no health flask charges and you have to unlock them. There's an upgrade that makes you keep an amount of gold after you die or finish a run. So you start the next one with more gold. Just lots of quality of life stuff like that makes you stronger, but also makes the game feel better. Like you have more ability to recover from taking damage with the Estus flasks. The starting with gold is really nice because you can start working on your build quite freely early on, and especially now in this new patch where like it's 25k is the maximum you can start with. Starting with 25,000 gold is actually like, that's so much. That's like 5 or 6 weapons now. So it really allows you to like play around with your build. I didn't start with very much this time because my last run ended without much gold, I guess. I was halfway through a run before I made this video, and I was like, I'm going to cancel this and start afresh because it'll make for better recording quality. There's like a lot of smoothness that's been added to the game in addition to the existing smoothness at launch. Like it's always had these kind of, I got hit because of one earlier, but generally the mobility affordances in this game are really nice. Like the game is very good about thinking, okay, they meant to jump to this ledge, I'll just give them a little bit of a ledge grab because they didn't quite get high enough, but I'll nudge them over it. It will like, you try and drop down off something and it like pushes you out the way and things like that. There's like loads of smoothness things. I think there's an option in the menu where you can decide whether or not you want to be able to roll off ledges. That's just like, you don't see that very often. That's really nice. So you can, you can stay on high ground and be able to dodge, or you can be able to roll off things for movement purposes, which I do all the time. Just like a little smoothness thing. There's lots of care and attention to detail that's gone into that. Most of that was in the game to start with, but the structure around it and like the balance of the economy, the balance of the weapons, the difficulty levels, enemy variety, level layouts, all of this stuff has been like radically remixed a million times. Well, 9 times I suppose. We're on patch 1.9 over the course of the level. I'm just gonna walk away somewhere so the level isn't juddering from the forge. It's quite distracting. Let's get into the next level, why not? There's the ground slam cancel thing that I talked about earlier. So yeah, there's the way they've changed the game over time. If you look back at when I looked at the old video, like the UI was so different. Showing things like this. It had this kind of old pixel art font, which I quite liked, which you can turn on in the options, but I've gotten used to the clearer read of this version. It's like the sort of slightly more modern looking UI now. There's more affixes, like weapon upgrades, that can really change the way the game feels. I think they've hit a really good point in this patch with synergy between builds. Like, there's loads of subtle stuff that you only get when you've played the game a little while. Like, there was a period of time, quite a long period of time, where fire was broken. It was quite easy to come by, and it was very easy to trigger as well. Like, there's multiple weapons that just throw fireballs and stuff, and then you could get the bonus damage. It used to be that all the bonus damage affixes were like 100% bonus damage to targets on fire, poison, bleeding, etc. Now it's changed up based on how easy that affix is to apply, which makes them more varied. And the status effects themselves in this patch have a different trait as well. Like, if you stack enough blood on somebody, it like bursts and like clears at once and applies a big stack of damage, which like that wasn't there before. Excuse me. Things like that. So you can see it here actually. Like, the root grenade has more damage to a stun target than it gets for a bleeding target, because stun is harder to come by. The Wave of Denial gets more damage for a target covered in oil, which is harder to apply than bleeding, and so on. So it's these sort of balance things where like synergizing your run around the damage over time effect feels fair, but you also don't feel obliged to go for them. Like there was a period of time where it was like, okay, fire builds on everything, although everything else was crap by comparison. And there was a long period of time where freezing enemies was broken because it was just, again, so much better or more efficient. So all the sort of high skill players were like, okay, ice grenade. You can't have two of the same skill or two of the same weapon anymore. A common high level tactic is to map both weapons to the same button, because you can't actually do that. You can fire them both at once. I don't do that because I don't know. I like the aesthetic of using one at once, and usually I have a shield anyway. But very good players will do that for high DPS, and speedrunners in particular will double stack weapons and just not get hit because they're too good. But now you can't do that, so having two of the same like broken skill is less of a problem, which allows them to push the skills a little more. Have them be more exciting. So these subtle things are the sort of things you'd expect in balance changes and patches, right? That's what patch iteration is often used for in games. But I've been really loving the team's willingness to like, no, this core mechanic is imbalanced, let's overhaul it. This other core mechanic is imbalanced, let's overhaul that as well, and just radically remix the game. And it's part of the reason I've kept coming back. Like every time you get into a rut with Dead Cells, you just wait a couple months and they'll be like, oh, here's a major update, and we've like completely redone it again. And now this new set of weapons is much better. This patch has kind of a finality to it. Like this might be the last major patch. I don't know. This is complete speculation. They haven't said anything to that effect that I'm aware of. But the developers, Motion Twin, recently split into two. So for those unaware, Motion Twin are a French, I think the term is workers collective. Basically, they're a flat structure, no hierarchy at all, company where everyone has equal input, and the pay is just like shared between everybody. So people obviously have their specializations. Like there are people who do art and people who do gameplay programming and what have you, but everyone's opinions are considered valid, and it has upsides and downsides. If you're interested, I think they've talked about it on GDC a couple of times. You can find them discussing the idea on YouTube. But one thing they've said is it's hard to scale. Like it's very hard to hire people, and it's difficult to have like when everything is done democratically. If you have a large number of people, it becomes unwieldy because you have to do everything by vote, especially for larger company decisions like pay changes, hiring people, firing people, and so on, and gameplay changes. So they've now split in two. So Dead Cells is being maintained and improved by a team called Evil Empire, who are another collective that's like affiliated with Motion Twin, and they're still like friends. They haven't like had a schism or anything. It's like they still talk to each other and stuff, but I don't know if they work in the same building. I can't remember. But they're now technically a separate collective and a separate company. And then Motion Twin themselves are working on their next game. And I think that since they changed over to having like, this is the Dead Cells update team, is the reason I bring it up, the way they've been looking at the game, I think, has changed. And the patches they've been doing have been quite sort of even braver. Like the game is out of early access and they started patching it more, like making bigger changes. And I suspect that might be, it's partly just like this game's now been out for like 2 years plus. And people have been, 3 years since initial release, but like probably 2 years since you could play it all the way through. And loads of people have played it. And there's loads of data on what works and what doesn't. Now they can make these more informed changes. But also it's probably a slightly separate set of people. Maybe they're people who've been very focused on playing the game and they're sort of making these big changes based on their own experiences. This is speculation again, but it's been interesting to watch how like you would have thought that, like, okay, we're going to split off this separate team to maintain Dead Cells, and then most of us are going to go and do something else. You'd think that would make it worse, but their quality has maintained, like, quite easily, and it's very impressive. Very cool. So yeah, I think it's kind of nice to do like a re-review of this game. I've been playing it not continuously, like daily or even weekly, but like it never really leaves my game rotation since 3 years ago, and every time they do a big patch, I'm right back in there. It's like multiplayer games where like everyone wants to explore the new patch. It's super cool to see what changes and how a game I already love gets even better every time. And I just thought that was worth highlighting because it's super impressive and like interesting how they've done it, in my opinion. So yeah, I think that about wraps this up. I should call it a day. I don't really have time in this video to do the rest of the run, but let me know in the comments if you're interested in seeing it. I can happily record that at some point. And yeah, thank you everybody for watching and listening, and I will see you next time.